A man believed he had saved a lost dog, raising it with love and trust. But, years later, a single terrifying moment revealed the truth. It was never a dog at all. What happened next shocked an entire town and left him questioning everything he thought he knew. The wind howled through the quiet countryside, carrying the smell of rain-soaked earth. John tightened his jacket as he walked along the muddy trail behind his small farmhouse. He often took evening walks to clear his head, but tonight felt different. The storm had passed only an hour ago, leaving the forest damp and eerily silent. Then a faint whimper cut through the night. John froze. He tilted his head, straining to hear. There it was again, soft, desperate, almost lost in the rustling leaves. His heart quickened as he followed the sound, stepping over fallen branches and puddles, guided only by instinct. Under a thick cluster of wet ferns he finally saw it. A tiny black puppy, trembling violently. Its fur was plastered to its body, and its wide, glossy eyes shimmered with fear. John crouched down slowly, whispering gentle words. The little creature hesitated, then stumbled toward him, collapsing into his hands with a weak sigh. Cradling it against his chest, John felt a rush of warmth and protectiveness. "Don't worry, little one," he murmured. "You're safe now." At that moment he had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. The tiny puppy spent its first night wrapped in an old wool blanket by the fireplace. John barely slept, waking every hour to check if the little creature was still breathing. By morning, the puppy had warmed up, its eyes brighter and more curious. John placed a shallow bowl of warm milk on the floor, and to his relief, the puppy lapped it up eagerly. Over the next few days, a quiet rhythm settled into John's life. He bathed the puppy gently, dried its sleek black fur, and fed it small meals throughout the day. The creature followed him everywhere, into the kitchen, out to the barn, even to the porch where John liked to sip his morning coffee. Wherever he went, the little dog was a shadow at his heels. Despite its tiny frame, there was something intense in the way it observed the world. Its dark eyes were always alert, studying every flicker of movement, every sound. It rarely barked, preferring to watch in silence, and at night it curled up at the foot of John's bed, as though it had been there all along. The bond between man and animal deepened with each passing day. John found comfort in the companionship, speaking to it like an old friend. He felt certain that fate had brought this puppy into his life, but now and then, he couldn't help but notice there was something different about his new companion, something he couldn't quite name. Weeks turned into months, and the tiny black puppy had grown, yet in ways John hadn't expected. Its legs were long and slender, its body sleek and muscular. Unlike most dogs, it never wagged its tail or barked in excitement. Instead, it moved with an almost cat-like grace, silent and calculated, as if it were always hunting something invisible. John first noticed something odd one evening when he tossed a ball across the yard. Instead of bounding after it with clumsy joy, the animal crouched low, its muscles rippling, and slinked forward before pouncing with uncanny precision. The motion sent a chill down his spine. It looked less like play and more like a predator, stalking prey. As the seasons changed, more peculiarities emerged. The animal preferred raw meat over dog food, gnawing at the bones with razor-sharp teeth. At night, it often slipped outside, disappearing into the darkness, only to return hours later with its fur damp and its eyes gleaming in the moonlight. John told himself it was nothing, just quirks of a unique dog. After all, he had grown attached to the creature. It slept beside him, watched him work, and seemed to understand his moods in a way no human could. But deep down, a small unease had taken root. This wasn't how dogs behaved. And then came the night that would force John to face the truth he had been ignoring all along. It was a cold autumn night when John first sensed that something was terribly wrong. The wind rattled the windows and the moon cast long silver shadows across the yard. He had left the back door slightly ajar so his dog could roam freely as it often did at night. But tonight, an eerie silence clung to the air. Around midnight, a sharp noise jolted him awake. A low growl, not from his animal, but from outside. Heart pounding, John grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the edge of the woods. There, crouched in the leaves, was his dog, its fur bristling, its body coiled and tense. Then, in one swift motion, it pounced, not at an intruder, but at a raccoon scurrying by. The sound that escaped its throat was a chilling snarl, unlike anything John had ever heard from a dog. When it turned its head toward him, the reflection in its eyes glowed amber, predatory, and wild. A cold realization began to settle in his chest. This wasn't a normal dog. It never had been. Its movements, its instincts, its silence, it all pointed to something else entirely. He stumbled back toward the house, his mind racing, the truth clawing at him. For the first time since the night he found it, John felt fear instead of comfort. And deep in his gut, he knew the creature he had raised might not be a dog at all. The next morning, John couldn't shake the unease that had rooted itself in his chest. He decided to observe the animal closely, determined to find answers. As the sun rose, casting a golden glow across the yard, he watched from the porch as the creature prowled silently near the tree. Its movements were graceful but predatory, each step calculated. He thought back to the day he had found it, tiny, shivering, and alone. It had seemed so helpless, but now it was clear that the creature was something entirely different. Determined, John drove into town to speak with the local wildlife officer, showing him a few photos he had taken on his phone. The officer's brow furrowed. Immediately, "Sir, this isn't a dog," he said gravely. "It's a wolf. Based on the markings and the size, you've been raising a wild animal." John's stomach dropped. A wolf. Suddenly the strange behaviors, the silent stalking, and the nighttime disappearances all made sense. His heart pounded as he realized how close he had been to a fully grown predator without even knowing it. That evening, as John sat by the fireplace, the wolf rested at his feet, its amber eyes flickering in the firelight. Despite the fear, he couldn't ignore the bond they had formed. It had trusted him and he had loved it as family. But John now understood the truth. He had saved a wolf, not a dog, and their lives would never be the same again. John spent the next few days in quiet reflection, torn between love and responsibility. He had raised the wolf from a helpless pup, but now it had grown into a powerful, untamed predator. No matter how much he wanted to deny it, he knew the truth. It didn't belong in his home. It belonged to the wild. One chilly morning he loaded the wolf into the back of his old pickup truck. The creature sat silently, its amber eyes fixed on him with a calm, trusting gaze that broke his heart. John drove deep into the forest along a dirt road he rarely traveled until he reached a clearing near a flowing stream. He knelt beside the wolf and gently removed the collar he had given it months ago. "You were never mine to keep," he whispered, his voice trembling. The wolf tilted its head as if understanding, then took a tentative step toward the trees. For a moment, it hesitated, looking back at the man who had saved its life, the man who had unknowingly raised a creature of the wild. Then, with a graceful leap, it vanished into the forest, swallowed by shadows and freedom. John sat on the ground, staring at the empty clearing, his chest ached, but he also felt a quiet peace. He had given the wolf what it needed most, a chance to live as it was meant to. As he drove home alone, a single thought lingered in his heart. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting